One morning, you wake up and find his food still in the bowl. You search the house but can't find him. It feels strange because he isn't the type to run away or anything like that. Until finally, you see that your dog is isolating himself, hiding under the bed so you won't see him and avoiding eye contact. You ask yourself, did I do something wrong? What's happening to him? Until an even more terrifying question arises. Does my dog know what's happening to him? Is he afraid? Is he in pain? Did I do enough? For a long time, it's been believed that when dogs are about to die, they tend to wander off or enter a stage of anxiety. But that's not exactly the case. The truth is, we know very little about our pets. This video is going to be a bit different from the rest because we're talking about something deeper, the final days of our beloved pets. But I want you to understand that this isn't dark or sad. Rather, from a psychological perspective, it's actually quite comforting. Your dog doesn't know he's dying, but he knows that something important, something much more significant is happening. Something that might mean never seeing each other again. Answering the question, do our dogs actually know they are going to cross the rainbow bridge? The answer isn't as simple as yes or no. In 2021, a philosopher named Susana Monsó from the University of Madrid in Spain published a study in a journal called Erkenntnis. In it, she proposed an idea that shifted the perception of many scientists, explaining that among many species, dogs possess a minimal concept of death. However, having a concept of death is not the same as having a perception of it, let alone one's own. Humans are the only species that think about what happens after we exist. Other species lack that specific reasoning. They don't think deeply about what comes next. What they do instead is something more immediate and, in its own way, more honest. They feel that their bodies no longer respond the way they used to, that walks are harder, that their appetite has changed. But I think the most interesting part of the case is they can smell it. It's no secret that dogs have a superpower when it comes to scent. Thanks to their 300 million olfactory receptors. There's a common urban legend about how they can smell cancer, a legend that is entirely true. In California, 5 ordinary household dogs were trained to detect lung cancer in samples on human breath. We're talking about 99% accuracy. A 2024 study at the Penn Vet Working Dog Center showed that dogs can detect cancer in the saliva of other dogs with 90% sensitivity. This means that, logically, they were constantly analyzing their own chemical signature, from their own scent to every breath they take, detecting compounds and everything going on inside them. They have the ability to detect when something is failing. Understanding all of this, we can see how dogs are essentially beings that can sense when something is wrong. When that happens, and I think most of us have been in this situation, they either start to distance themselves, hiding in corners or under the bed, or they do the exact opposite and develop an incredibly strong attachment to you. Most people interpret the former as sadness and the latter as love. However, I believe science has an answer that is more interesting and even more moving. In 1988, Benjamin Hart from the UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine published a paper that became fundamental to understanding sick animals. He demonstrated that isolation, loss of appetite, increased sleep, and social withdrawal are not signs of giving up. They are evolutionary traits inherited through centuries of growth. They aren't in a state of depression. Instead, they shut down all physical activity to focus all their energy on fighting the illness. Hart called this the animal's total effort to overcome, a technical way of saying, I'm going to use everything I've got. But there's also a second factor. In ancient times, when dogs were more wolf than dog, sick or elderly animals would move away from the pack to draw away predators. This was to avoid being a burden and to help their own, preventing the spread of disease or slowing the group down. Everything we've discussed helps us understand more deeply why they behave this way. It's part of their nature, a strange way of saying you are one of their own. Whether they draw closer or pull away, it stems from that biological need to protect, to inform, and in turn to express their loyalty. Pain is overwhelming, confusing, and conflicting. When a dog is afraid, he runs straight to his protector, which will always be you. But when he is certain of things, he moves away to look out for you. We just have to know how to tell the difference. Specialists explain that sudden, intense attachment combined with restlessness or panting often indicates uncontrolled pain, which should always be evaluated by a vet. But the attachment itself, that isn't desperation, that is trust. We've all had similar experiences with a dog we've owned, or if not, it's something that eventually happens. He visits every family member one by one. On his last day, he walks to his favorite spot in the yard that he hadn't visited in months. Or after days of barely moving, he suddenly gets up, eats dinner, wags his tail, and seems completely normal for an hour, and then he's gone. This is known as the last rally. It's a pattern that can look different every time, but it begins with a sudden burst of energy. This isn't just a random occurrence. In 2023, a group of researchers cataloged 114 of these accounts from owners and veterinarians to find this answer. One veterinarian even noted that it wasn't uncommon to be called to put a dog down, only to be greeted at the door by an animal barking and jumping. A team led by Jimo Borjigan at the University of Michigan discovered that when the brain loses oxygen during cardiac arrest, it doesn't simply shut off. Instead, it produces a surge of organized gamma wave activity in the posterior cortex. They found that in humans, this is a final burst of neural coherence as the brain tries one last time to restore balance. Who's to say the same thing doesn't happen to dogs? It might be something in nature, it might be biological. The point is that dogs use their last ounce of energy to eat what you offered them, to look at your face one more time, and to reaffirm their bond. Both things can be true at the same time. The explanation can be science and the meaning can be real. This is the hardest moment, the one anyone would fear, but it doesn't have to be bad, and it doesn't have to be traumatic. If you're carrying guilt over a situation like this, keep watching. Some people make the decision, one that is never easy and always painful, to choose euthanasia for their pet. This is not a bad thing. In fact, when there are no other options left, it might be the kindest act. A single dose essentially flips a switch, turning off the brain and the system, specifically the consciousness. Of course, it's a more complex process. The animal loses brain activity about 52 seconds after the injection, falling into a deep sleep where they don't actually feel the moment they lose consciousness. This was proven in 2015 by a team at UC Davis led by Monica Ailman. And yes, it's known that following those minutes, there may be movements, reactions, or gasps that make it seem like they are suffering. But that isn't the case. It is merely a muscular reaction. They are already gone. They aren't suffering. We know the heart can continue to beat for up to 16 minutes afterward, but you have nothing to worry about. They passed in the most peaceful way possible. The process isn't traumatic during or before the injection either. For them, things work differently. They don't perceive that something good or bad is being done to them. In fact, at the Freie University in Berlin, they monitored over 40 animals and found that stress markers remained low at all times, whether the owner was present or not, and whether they were at home or at the vet. The concept of euthanasia simply has no meaning to them. But here is what did matter, and this is a part we want you to remember. As we discussed in our first video, fMRI research by Gregory Burns at Emory University showed that the caudate nucleus, that's the brain's reward center, activates more strongly at the scent of a familiar owner than at any other stimulus. Not food, not other dogs, you. And that activation happens even when the owner isn't visible. The scent alone is enough. What this means is that in those final seconds of consciousness, if you are there, your scent, your voice, and your hand on their fur are registered in the part of your dog's brain associated with safety and reward. You are the last good thing they experience. Not the pain, not the fear. You. The science on this is not ambiguous. Your presence is the greatest gift you can give them. And if that brings you any comfort, hold on to it, because it's real. And then comes the hardest part, grief. Anyone who has ever had a pet knows this is more than just a passing feeling. It's something that demands respect. For many people, the loss of a pet can be incredibly distressing. For some, it is exactly like losing a human loved one. Grief and the reaction to it are different for everyone. But it isn't an isolated case, nor is it merely subjective. In 2016, the journal PLOS ONE published an article from Maynooth University in Ireland, led by Philip Hyland, where he evaluated 975 people who had lost a pet. Using clinical techniques for prolonged grief disorder, the results were striking. 7.5% met all the diagnostic criteria, while a national survey by the RSPCA found that 75% of pet owners begin grieving before the animal even passes away. They call this anticipatory grief. Furthermore, less than 7% felt that the people around them took their pain seriously. More than half hid how they were truly feeling. Psychologists call this disenfranchised grief, a pain that society tells you isn't valid, but your brain doesn't care what society says. Researchers from Harvard and Massachusetts General Hospital scanned the brains of mothers looking at photos of their own children and their own dogs. The core emotional network, the amygdala, the orbitofrontal cortex, The dorsal pitumen activated in both cases. The attachment circuit doesn't check the species, it responds to the bond. As we've discussed through the series, the relationship between a dog and their person is written in stress hormones, heart rate patterns, and even the gut bacteria they literally share from living together. When that bond is broken, grief isn't just sentimental, it's your nervous system registering the loss of a biological companion whose body was synchronized with yours, and that deserves to be honored, not minimized. So, here's what the science actually says when you put all of it together. Your dog does not fear death, they do not lie in dread. They do not count the hours. What they carry instead is something that every brain scan confirms, a neurological portrait of you stored in their reward circuits that activates every time they catch your scent or hear your voice. You are not just their owner, you are their favorite experience. That's not poetry, that's data. And the life you gave them, the walks, the couch time, the mornings, the way you said their name, all of it built a welfare history that veterinary science would classify as good, not because every day was perfect, but because the balance was overwhelmingly positive. You gave them that. If you're in this moment now, or if it's coming, be there. Your presence matters, down to the neurochemistry. And if it already happened and you're still carrying the weight of it, know this. It is the biologically accurate proportional cost of having been someone's entire world and having them be part of yours. If this video reached you at the right time or it helped you understand something you've been carrying, subscribe to this channel and tell me in the comments, what is one moment with your dog that you'll carry with you forever? I want to hear it.